Is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the fact that the Sharks have issued qualifying offers to 7 of their 14 pending restricted free agents. So basically, a qualifying offer allows you to retain the restricted free agents' rights of your players. If you do not issue a qualifying offer to a player who is a restricted free agent, they will become an unrestricted free agent if you don't do this by the qualifying offer deadline. And what a qualifying offer is that a player has the opportunity to accept it, and if they do accept a qualifying offer, it basically gives them a 1-year contract at almost the same amount of money as they were making the previous year. If you were making more than $1 million on your previous contract, you will get the same exact term or the same exact dollar value, but just for a single year. If you were making less than $1 million, you might get a very slight raise. So basically, this is mostly a formality for some players. For someone like Timo Meier or Kevin Labanc, this isn't because the Sharks actually expect them to accept the qualifying offer, which would just basically be a slight raise from the entry-level deal. This is just so they can retain those restricted free agents' rights and so that they can negotiate a more fair contract, so Meier will still end up getting the predicted amount. For some of the other players who were given, someone like Kyle Wood, Nick DeSimone, Maxim Letunov, the possibility of actually accepting that qualifying offer is certainly there. I don't think Wood, DeSimone, or Letunov have really any chance of making the Sharks at the very least next season, so they're mostly being signed to help out with the AHL team that I'm sure Doug Wilson still does care about, of course, and as such, they are given deals to still, develop in the system. Someone like Dylan Gambrell could also potentially accept that qualifying offer, but he certainly has more of a chance to make it with the big squad, potentially going to get an opportunity to try out in the team's bottom 6, especially with the cap crunch being even more crazy now that the cap has only climbed to $81.5 million compared to the predicted $83 million. One of the surprises for the players given a qualifying offer is Antti Suomela, a player who had a decent amount of hype when he was brought over from Finland at the end of last season. He started the season basically with the Sharks, but by about December he was already down with the Barracuda and didn't look particularly impressive there. So there was question whether or not he would be traded to a different team or maybe he would just be let go. But since he was a restricted free agent, the Sharks decided to retain his rights, and so he will likely be back in the Shark system by next season. While it's interesting to see the players who were given qualifying offers, it's also interesting to see the players who were not given and are thus becoming unrestricted free agents for July 1st. Now, a lot of these names, of course, are rather unrecognizable for most Sharks fans. I mean, who is Kevin Fitzgerald? I've never even heard of this player in my life, but there are a couple of names here that may come as a bit of a surprise. The first being Rourke Chartier, a player who had some hype in the Sharks system, played a few games, just about a dozen with the Sharks this season, and he looked okay. But he's just had a lot of injury issues in the past couple of years. He really hasn't gotten to play so many games with the Barracuda because of that, so he just hasn't really been able to pan out to do much of anything, and so it seems as though the Sharks have sort of come to the end of the line with Rourke Chartier, and maybe a different team will give him another chance. Maybe a bit more interesting here, and probably the premier name and the main reason to talk about this would be the fact that Joakim Ryan was not given a qualifying offer, and as such, he will become an unrestricted free agent. The fall of Joakim Ryan this season was noted by myself multiple times. I mean, at the start, he was okay, but he ends up getting pushed out of the lineup for Shemek. Once Shemek goes down with injury, Ryan's given another chance in the last couple dozen games of the season, or maybe just closer to a dozen games, and he was just completely terrible, but to a point where he was replaced in the lineup by the Sharks' 9th defenseman coming into the season, Jacob Middleton. Ryan ends up starting for the playoffs, plays like just a few minutes per game, at a point going as low as about 3 minutes in a single 60-minute game, which is just absolutely insane for a 6th defenseman, but that was the case here because Ryan just was not reliable enough, and as such now it seems as though the Sharks will not be re-signing him. Now, of course, it's not a guarantee, as we have prime example from the Sharks themselves just last year when they did not extend a qualifying offer to Dylan DeMello. They ended up renegotiating a different contract and signed him as an unrestricted free agent. Now, of course, maybe it's not the best example because DeMello ended up getting traded in that offseason anyway, and so he never did play another game in Teal. But, it's a very real possibility that Ryan could renegotiate something with the Sharks. I would doubt it. I don't think Ryan will be back. It's likely he'll probably get a chance as like a seventh defenseman with a team that just has a ton of cap room, like a Colorado or a Carolina. But just to say that it's not exactly eliminated as a possibility that Ryan does return with the Sharks, but the emergence of Radim Shemek, who will hopefully be healthy to start next season, has sort of, pushed him out of that top six and moved him a bit more into, Barracuda territory, which I'm sure Ryan doesn't like. And as we see with Wilson here, he doesn't want to pay the money to have him sit there like that. Class dismissed.